Give thing between legs to me now. The shrill demand echoed through the Breen reception hall, freezing every diplomat in their tracks. Jeffrey Burns, Earth's top negotiator, felt his face flush as all eyes turned to his lower body. He'd prepared for tense discussions, political maneuvering, even the possibility of failure in these crucial peace talks. But nothing could have readied him for this moment. A strikingly beautiful alien scientist pointing at his groin and loudly requesting he hand over his genitals. The Breen homeworld, with its swirling purple skies and crystalline architecture, had seemed the perfect backdrop for preventing an interstellar war. Now, as an awkward silence descended upon the gathered delegates, Jeffrey realized just how little humans truly understood their potential alien allies. Oren, the female Breen scientist who'd made the outburst, continued to stare at Jeffrey's lower half with unabashed fascination. Her iridescent skin shimmered as she took a step closer, ignoring the horrified expressions of her fellow Breen. "I must examine human reproductive organs," Oren insisted, her translator struggling to convey the intensity of her scientific curiosity. "Critical for understanding your species." The human delegation erupted in angry protest. Admiral Chen, red-faced with indignation, demanded an immediate apology. Meanwhile, the Breen leadership looked mortified, their usual composure shattered by this breach of protocol. Jeffrey's mind raced. This wasn't just a diplomatic faux pas. It was a powder keg that could ignite interstellar conflict. The Breen's limited knowledge of human anatomy had collided spectacularly with Earth's cultural taboos, creating a crisis no one had anticipated. As Oren was hurriedly escorted from the room, Jeffrey caught a glimpse of determination in her multifaceted eyes. He knew this wouldn't be the end of her quest for knowledge, a realization that sent a chill down his spine. The Breen arch-counselor approached, head bowed in apology. "We offer deepest regrets for this misunderstanding. Our studies of human physiology are incomplete. We meant no offense." Jeffrey nodded, mind whirling as he tried to salvage the situation. How could he bridge this gap in understanding without violating his own cultural norms or personal boundaries? The fate of two civilizations might hinge on his ability to navigate this bizarre impasse. As the reception slowly resumed, tensions simmering beneath forced pleasantries, Jeffrey grappled with an impossible choice. Should he risk further misunderstandings by avoiding the topic of human biology entirely? Or take the unprecedented step of providing the Breen with intimate anatomical details to save the peace process? One thing was certain. This diplomatic mission had veered into uncharted territory. Jeffrey Burns, tasked with preventing war between worlds, now found himself facing a challenge no training manual could have prepared him for. The clock was ticking, and somewhere in the vast Breen complex, a determined alien scientist was undoubtedly plotting her next attempt to satisfy her curiosity about human anatomy. Jeffrey Burns took a deep breath, steadying himself as the reception slowly resumed around him. The Breen arch-counselor's apology had done little to dispel the thick tension permeating the air. As he watched the alien diplomats mingle uneasily with their human counterparts, an idea began to form in his mind. Approaching Admiral Chen, Jeffrey spoke in a low voice. "Sir, I believe I have a solution to prevent further misunderstandings." The Admiral's eyebrows rose skeptically. "I'm listening, Burns." "We need to provide the Breen with accurate information about human biology," Jeffrey explained. "A controlled exchange could prevent incidents like this from happening again." Chen's face reddened slightly, but he nodded grudgingly. "Make it happen, Burns, but keep it professional." With the Admiral's approval, Jeffrey sought out Chancellor Zix, the stern male Breen who led their high council. The alien's iridescent skin rippled with what Jeffrey assumed was agitation as he approached. "Chancellor," Jeffrey began, choosing his words carefully, "I propose we arrange a formal briefing on human biology for your scientific team. This could help bridge our cultural gaps and prevent future misunderstandings." Zix's multifaceted eyes studied Jeffrey intently. After a long moment, he inclined his head. "Agreed, but we insist on strict protocols." As Jeffrey worked out the details with Zix, he failed to notice Oren slipping away from the reception, perseverance etched on her alien features. Over the next few days, Jeffrey threw himself into preparations for the sensitive presentation. He paced his quarters, dictating notes to his comm device. Computer, secure link to Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Xenobiology Department. The holographic image of Dr. Rodriguez flickered to life. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her expression serious. Burns, I've reviewed your outline. We need to tread carefully here. Jeffrey nodded. Agreed. Any specific concerns? The Breen's alien physiology might lead to unexpected interpretations of human anatomy, Elena warned. We need to be explicit in our explanations while maintaining cultural sensitivity. They spent hours refining the presentation, anticipating potential questions and pitfalls. By the time the day of the briefing arrived, Jeffrey felt as prepared as he could be, given the unprecedented nature of the task. The conference room in the Breen capital's diplomatic quarter was a marvel of alien engineering. Holographic displays shimmered in the air, and bioscanners hummed softly along the walls. Chancellor Zix and a small group of Breen scientists were already seated as Jeffrey entered, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Taking a deep breath, Jeffrey began his carefully worded explanation. He used the holographic displays to project three-dimensional models of human anatomy, starting with basic biological systems before moving on to the more sensitive topic of reproduction. The human reproductive system, Jeffrey said, gesturing to the hologram, consists of internal and external organs that... A piercing alarm cut through his words, causing everyone in the room to jump. Red lights flashed as a Breen security officer burst through the door. Chancellor, the guard's translator squawked, there's been a breach in the diplomatic quarter. Chaos erupted as security footage appeared on the holographic displays. Jeffrey's stomach dropped as he recognized the figure slipping through the complex's corridors. Oren. In the ensuing commotion, no one noticed the alien scientist herself sliding into the conference room, concealing herself behind a large, crystalline structure that Jeffrey assumed was Breen furniture. Chancellor Zix barked orders to his security team, then turned to Jeffrey. We must postpone this briefing until the intruder is apprehended. Jeffrey nodded, trying to hide his relief at the interruption. The Breen filed out of the room, leaving him alone. He leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. Fascinating, a familiar voice chirped behind him. Jeffrey whirled around to find Oren emerging from her hiding place, her eyes fixed on the still-active holographic display of human anatomy. Before he could react, Oren raised a small device. A shimmering force field sprang to life around them, cutting off any hope of escape. Now, Oren said, her voice thrumming with excitement, you will provide a private demonstration of human mating methods. Jeffrey's mind raced. Outside the force field, he could see Breen security gathering, unable to penetrate the energy barrier. He held up his hands placatingly. Oren, listen to me, he began, keeping his voice calm. I understand your curiosity, but this isn't the right way to satisfy it. In human culture, we have a concept called consent. It means... Consent is irrelevant, Oren interrupted. This is for the greater good of both our species. Jeffrey frowned. What do you mean? Oren's iridescent skin pulsed with what might have been excitement or desperation. The Breen face a crisis. Our population dwindles due to low fertility rates. We seek compatible species for procreation. Humans may be the key to our survival. The revelation hit Jeffrey like a physical blow. The stakes had just risen exponentially. This wasn't just about satisfying scientific curiosity. It was about the future of an entire alien race. Oren, Jeffrey said carefully, I understand the gravity of your situation, but we can't rush into something like this. The implications for both our species are enormous. Outside the force field, Chancellor Zix approached, his expression a mix of anger and concern. Jeffrey could see members of the human delegation arriving as well, their faces pale with shock. Caught between the desperate alien scientist and the growing crowd of diplomats, Jeffrey realized he was walking a razor's edge. One wrong move could spark an interstellar incident, or worse. He took a deep breath, mind racing to find a solution that would satisfy Oren's need for information, address the Breen's larger concerns, and maintain the delicate balance of human-Breen relations. Oren, he began again, Let's discuss this calmly. I promise we can find a way to help your people without violating any ethical boundaries. But first, you need to lower this force field. Jeffrey took a deep breath, his mind racing to find a solution that would satisfy Oren's need for information, address the Breen's larger concerns, and maintain the delicate balance of human-Breen relations. Oren, he began again, let's discuss this calmly. I promise we can find a way to help your people without violating any ethical boundaries. But first, you need to lower this force field. Before Oren could respond, Chancellor Zix's voice boomed through the room's communication system. Attention, human and Breen delegates. An emergency meeting is being called to address this situation. All parties are to report to the central chamber immediately. Oren hesitated, her iridescent skin pulsing with conflicting emotions. After a tense moment, she deactivated the force field. As it shimmered out of existence, Breen security personnel swarmed into the room, surrounding Oren and Jeffrey. Chancellor Zix approached, his multifaceted eyes narrowed. This breach of protocol is unacceptable, he said, his translator struggling to convey the mixture of anger and concern in his voice. But we must address the underlying issues. Burns, your presence is required at the emergency meeting. As they were escorted to the central chamber, Jeffrey noticed Dr. Elena Rodriguez hurrying down an adjacent corridor, her face etched with worry. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave him a slight nod, indicating she'd been summoned to assist. The central chamber was a vast, domed room with swirling holographic displays and rows of crystalline seats. Human and Breen delegates filed in, their faces a mixture of confusion, anger, and apprehension. Jeffrey took his place at the front of the human delegation, while Oren was seated with a group of Breen scientists flanked by security personnel. Chancellor Zix called the meeting to order, his voice echoing through the chamber. We face a crisis that threatens not only these negotiations, but the future of the Breen species itself. Scientist Oren, explain your actions and the reasons behind them. Oren stood, her iridescent skin shimmering under the chamber's lights. Esteemed delegates, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I acted out of desperation. The Breen face extinction. For centuries, our population has dwindled due to catastrophically low fertility rates. We have exhausted all options within our species. Our only hope lies in finding compatible alien races for hybridization. A murmur rippled through the chamber as the implications of Oren's words sank in. Jeffrey felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the true stakes of these negotiations. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her voice calm and measured. If I may, Chancellor, I believe I have a solution that could satisfy both parties' needs while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Zix nodded, gesturing for her to continue. I propose creating a controlled environment where Breen scientists can observe human mating behaviors through simulations and detailed holographic models, Dr. Rodriguez explained. This would provide the information they seek without requiring physical demonstrations from our delegates. Chancellor Zix considered the proposal, his alien features unreadable. This could be acceptable. However, we would require verification of the data's accuracy. Jeffrey tensed, sensing what was coming next. We insist on conducting a non-invasive scan of a human subject, Zix continued, his eyes fixed on Jeffrey, to ensure the holographic models are precise. The human delegates erupted in protest, but Jeffrey raised a hand to quiet them. He knew this might be their only chance to salvage the negotiations and prevent an interstellar incident. I volunteer, Jeffrey said, his voice cutting through the commotion, under strict conditions and with Dr. Rodriguez overseeing the process. Chancellor Zix agreed, and within minutes, Jeffrey found himself being escorted to a medical facility within the diplomatic quarter. The room was a blend of familiar and alien technology, with sleek diagnostic equipment alongside pulsing, organic-looking Breen devices. As Dr. Rodriguez calibrated the scanning equipment, she spoke to Jeffrey in a low voice. We'll be monitoring everything closely. If you feel uncomfortable at any point, just say the word. Jeffrey nodded, steeling himself as he lay down on the scanning platform. A shimmering field of energy enveloped him, and he felt a slight tingling sensation as the Breen equipment began its work. The room fell silent save for the soft hum of machinery. Jeffrey watched as holographic displays flickered to life, showing detailed images of his internal anatomy. The Breen scientists huddled around the displays, their voices a low murmur of excitement and curiosity. Suddenly, one of the Breen let out a sharp exclamation. The others crowded around, their iridescent skin pulsing with what Jeffrey assumed was agitation. "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep the nervousness out of his voice. Dr. Rodriguez studied the display, her eyes widening. "Jeffrey," she said slowly, "they've found something unexpected. Your genetic structure contains markers that suggest a much higher compatibility with Breen biology than we thought possible." The implications of this discovery hit Jeffrey like a physical blow. As the Breen scientists conferred in hushed tones, he realized that the entire landscape of the negotiations had just shifted dramatically. Chancellor Zix entered the room, his posture rigid with barely held-back excitement. "Ambassador Burns," he said, his translator struggling to convey the intensity of his words, "this changes everything. I propose we expand our talks to include a joint human-Breen scientific research initiative. We could explore controlled hybridization experiments, potentially saving our species while offering benefits to humanity as well." Jeffrey sat up slowly, his mind turning from the implications. He knew that his response in this moment could shape the future of both species and potentially the entire galactic community. As he prepared to reply, alarms began blaring throughout the diplomatic quarter. A Breen security officer burst into the room, his iridescent skin pulsing with urgency. "Chancellor," the guard's translator squawked, "we've detected multiple unauthorized transmissions leaving the complex. The data from the scan, it's being broadcast to unknown recipients." Jeffrey's blood ran cold as he realized the true complexity of the situation unfolding around him. What had begun as a diplomatic mission to prevent war had now spiraled into a potential crisis that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. With tensions rising and the stakes higher than ever, Jeffrey knew he had to navigate this treacherous new landscape carefully. As he prepared to enter the most crucial negotiation of his career, he couldn't shake the feeling that the fate of both humanity and the Breen hung in the balance. Balance. As Chancellor Zix and the human delegates processed the implications of the unauthorized data transmission, Jeffrey's mind raced through potential scenarios. The tension in the room was palpable, with both humans and Breen eyeing each other warily. Dr. Rodriguez broke the uneasy silence. "We need to contain this situation immediately. Chancellor, can your security team trace the transmission's destination?" Zix's iridescent skin pulsed with agitation as he conferred with his security officers. "Our technicians are working on it, but the signal was heavily encrypted. It may take time to decipher its intended recipients." Jeffrey stepped forward, his expression grim. "Chancellor, regardless of who received that data, we need to address the larger issue at hand. The genetic compatibility between our species changes everything about these negotiations." Zix's multifaceted eyes fixed on Jeffrey. "Indeed, Ambassador Burns, this discovery could be the key to saving the Breen from extinction. We must explore this further. I propose we establish a joint human-Breen research initiative," Jeffrey said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We can study this compatibility in a controlled, ethical manner that respects both our species' values." Dr. Rodriguez nodded in agreement. "I can oversee the human side of the research team. We'll need to establish strict ethical guidelines to ensure all experiments are conducted properly." Chancellor Zix considered the proposal, his alien features unreadable. After a moment, he spoke. "This is acceptable. We will provide our most qualified scientists for this endeavor. However, we require that you, Ambassador Burns, serve as the primary human subject for our studies." Jeffrey felt a knot form in his stomach, but he knew the importance of his role in maintaining peace between their species. "I accept, Chancellor, on the condition that Dr. Rodriguez has full oversight of all procedures." As the delegates began to hash out the details of the research initiative, alarms continued to blare throughout the complex. Security personnel rushed back and forth, their urgent communications creating a backdrop of controlled chaos. In the midst of the commotion, Jeffrey noticed Oren being escorted into the room by Breen guards. Despite her earlier actions, the alien scientist's expertise in breen biology made her an invaluable asset to the project. "I volunteer my knowledge for this initiative," Oren said, her voice tinged with a mixture of excitement and remorse. "My actions were misguided, but my intention to save our species remains true." Chancellor Zix nodded, his pragmatism overriding any lingering anger. "Your expertise will be crucial, Scientist Oren. You will join the research team under close supervision." As the basic framework of the initiative took shape, Dr. Rodriguez approached Jeffrey. "We'll need a neutral location for this research," she said, her voice low. "Somewhere both species can work together without the political pressures of our respective worlds." Jeffrey nodded, an idea forming. "There's a space station orbiting an uninhabited planet in a nearby system. It's been used for joint scientific ventures in the past. We could repurpose it for our needs." Within hours, the wheels were set in motion. As diplomatic channels buzzed with activity, coordinating the logistics of the unprecedented research project, Jeffrey found himself aboard a shuttle bound for the space station. The gravity of the situation caused great concern on him as he watched the Breen homeworld recede into the distance. The space station, a gleaming structure of metal and composite materials, loomed before them. As they docked, Jeffrey could see shuttles from both human and Breen vessels offloading equipment and personnel. Inside, the station was a flurry of activity. Human and Breen scientists worked side by side, setting up laboratories and calibrating equipment. The air was thick with a mixture of excitement and tension, two vastly different species attempting to bridge the gap between them. Dr. Rodriguez quickly established herself as the project's ethical compass, insisting on transparent protocols and safeguards for all experiments. Her firm but diplomatic approach helped ease some of the initial friction between the human and Breen research teams. Jeffrey, for his part, found himself at the center of attention. As he underwent a series of non-invasive tests and simulations, he couldn't help but feel like a specimen under a microscope. The Breen scientists, led by Oren, meticulously documented every aspect of his physiology and reproductive processes. Days blended into weeks as the research progressed. Despite the initial awkwardness, Jeffrey began to develop a grudging respect for Oren's dedication and scientific acumen. The Breen scientist's persistence in understanding human biology was matched only by her willingness to share knowledge of her own species. One afternoon, as Jeffrey lay in a scanner undergoing yet another round of tests, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. The Breen equipment surrounding him began to spark and smoke, and he felt a surge of energy course through his body. "Oren!" he shouted, struggling to free himself from the malfunctioning machinery. "What's happening?" The Breen scientist rushed to his aid, her iridescent skin pulsing with what Jeffrey now recognized as concern. "Power surge," she explained, her translator struggling to keep up with her rapid speech. "The isolation protocols have activated. We're sealed in until systems can be restored." As the smoke cleared, Jeffrey and Oren found themselves trapped in the sealed chamber, surrounded by flickering holographic displays and the hum of backup systems struggling to maintain power. "We need to work together to get out of this," Jeffrey said, pushing aside his discomfort at the situation. "Can you access the emergency override from that terminal?" Oren nodded, her appendages flying over the alien interface. "I can reroute power from non-essential systems, but we'll need to manually reset the primary junction in Section C." For the next hour, human and Breen worked in tandem, their differences forgotten in the face of a common goal. As they collaborated to restore systems and disengage the isolation protocols, Jeffrey found himself gaining a new appreciation for Oren's problem-solving skills and adaptability. Finally, with a hiss of depressurization, the chamber doors slid open. Dr. Rodriguez and a team of human and Breen personnel rushed in, concern etched on their faces. "We're fine," Jeffrey assured them, surprised to find he was actually smiling. "Just a little impromptu team-building exercise." As the research team worked to repair the damaged equipment, Jeffrey couldn't help but feel that the incident had somehow shifted the dynamic between the human and Breen scientists. The shared experience of overcoming a crisis, however small, had fostered a sense of camaraderie that had been lacking before. Little did Jeffrey know that this newfound spirit of cooperation would soon be tested by a discovery that would shake the very foundations of both their species' understanding of their place in the galaxy. As he helped clear away debris from the malfunctioning equipment, he had no inkling of the earth-shattering revelation that lay just around the corner, waiting to redefine everything they thought they knew about humans, Breen, and their shared cosmic heritage. As Jeffrey helped clear away debris from the malfunctioning equipment, a notification chirped on his personal device. He glanced down, his eyes widening as he saw the encrypted message that had been transmitted during the earlier security breach. After a moment of hesitation, he made a decision that would alter the course of their mission. "Dr. Rodriguez, Chancellor Zix," Jeffrey called out, his voice cutting through the din of the repair efforts. "I need to speak with you both immediately." The human scientist and Breen leader approached, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. Jeffrey took a deep breath and revealed the contents of the message, coordinates to a remote star system. "I believe we should investigate this together," Jeffrey said, his gaze moving between his human colleague and the Breen Chancellor. "Whatever we find, it could be crucial to our research and the future of our species." Chancellor Zix's iridescent skin pulsed with a pattern Jeffrey had come to recognize as deep contemplation. After a moment, the Breen leader spoke, his translator conveying a tone of grudging respect. "Your honesty is unexpected, Ambassador Burns, but appreciated. I agree to a joint expedition." Within hours, a small team was assembled for the mission. Jeffrey found himself aboard the newly christened exploration vessel, Harmony, a name that felt both aspirational and ironic, given the fragile nature of the human-Breen alliance. Joining him were Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Oren, and a Breen military officer named Krell, whose presence served as a reminder of the high stakes of their mission. As the Harmony sped through the void towards the mysterious coordinates, Jeffrey stood on the bridge, watching the unfamiliar stars streak by. The ship hummed with advanced technology, a fusion of human and Breen engineering that spoke to the potential of their cooperation. "Long-range scans are picking up something," Krill announced, his translator struggling to convey the excitement in his alien voice. "Artificial structure detected, orbiting a planet in the target system." The bridge erupted into a flurry of activity as the crew focused their efforts on gathering more data. As they drew closer, holographic displays flickered to life, showing a massive space station suspended against the backdrop of a desolate world. "Impossible," Dr. Rodriguez breathed, her eyes wide as she studied the readouts. The architecture, it incorporates elements from both human and Breen design. But these dating scans, they're millions of years old. Jeffrey felt a chill run down his spine as he absorbed the implications. How could this station predate both our civilizations? The Harmony docked with the ancient station, its systems interfacing smoothly with the millions-year-old technology. As the airlock cycled, Jeffrey found himself standing shoulder to shoulder with Oren, the Breen scientist's iridescent skin pulsing with what he now recognized as nervous anticipation. They stepped into the station, their footsteps echoing in corridors that had stood empty for eons. The air was stale but breathable, preserved by systems beyond their comprehension. As they moved deeper into the structure, dormant consoles flickered to life, responding to their presence. "It's like the station is waking up," Dr. Rodriguez murmured, her hand hovering over a pulsing control panel. Suddenly the air shimmered, and a holographic figure materialized before them. The being was neither human nor Breen, its form a strange amalgamation of features that hinted at a common ancestor to both species. "Greetings, children of the seeded worlds," the hologram spoke, its voice resonating in multiple languages simultaneously. "We are the progenitors, the shapers of life in this galaxy. You stand in the nexus, a repository of our greatest experiment, the seeding of genetically compatible life forms across the stars." The team stood in stunned silence as the hologram continued, revealing the grand design behind their shared genetic heritage. As the message faded, they found themselves grappling with a truth that shattered their understanding of their place in the universe. Their exploration took on a new urgency as they raced to download the vast progenitor database, knowing it held the key to solving the Breen's reproductive crisis and unlocking the shared potential of their species. but their progress was interrupted by the sudden activation of the station's automated defense systems. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as the team scrambled for cover. Jeffrey found himself exposed, a lethal blast hurtling towards him. In a blur of motion, Oren shoved him aside, taking the brunt of the blast herself. The Breen scientist crumpled to the ground, her iridescent skin flickering weakly. "Oren!" Jeffrey cried out, rushing to her side. As he cradled her injured form, he felt a surge of emotion that transcended the boundaries of their species. In that moment, the potential for true cooperation between humans and Breen became more than just a diplomatic goal. It was a visceral reality. While Oren recovered in the Harmony's medical bay, Jeffrey and Dr. Rodriguez worked feverishly to extract as much data as possible from the rapidly deteriorating progenitor systems. The station groaned around them, power fluctuations growing more frequent as ancient systems struggled to remain active. "We're running out of time," Dr. Rodriguez warned, her fingers flying over the alien interface. "The station can't sustain this level of activity much longer." As they raced against the clock, Krell's voice crackled over the comm system, tight with tension. "Burns, Rodriguez, you need to see this. I've found something unexpected." They rushed to Krell's location, finding the Breen officer standing before a hidden chamber filled with rows of stasis pods. Most were dark and lifeless, but one pulsed with a soft, steady light. Inside, they could make out the unmistakable form of a progenitor, suspended in timeless sleep. "Is it alive?" Jeffrey asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, a proximity alert blared through the station. Dr. Rodriguez checked her handheld scanner, her face paling. Multiple ships approaching, various configurations. It seems we're not the only ones who received those coordinates. As the team debated their next move, revive the progenitor, continue extracting data, or retreat, a power surge rippled through the stasis pod chamber. The active pod systems flared to life, readings spiking across the board. "It's waking up," Krell announced, a mix of awe and apprehension in his voice. Jeffrey felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. With unknown ships closing in and a member of an ancient, galaxy-shaping race stirring from millennia of slumber, he knew that his next decision would have consequences that would ripple across the stars. As alarms blared and the stasis pod's opening sequence initiated, he steeled himself for whatever would emerge from the mists of time. Ancient slumber. The pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of cryogenic vapor. Jeffrey's heart raced as he activated the station's universal translator, preparing to face whatever emerged from the mists of time. A tall humanoid figure stepped out, its iridescent skin shimmering under the station's lights. Multiple eyes blinked, adjusting to the brightness after eons of darkness. The being's gaze swept across the assembled team, a mix of curiosity and confusion evident in its alien features. "I am Zara," the progenitor announced, its voice resonating through the translator in a melodious cadence. "What year is it? How long have I slept?" Jeffrey swallowed hard, keenly aware of the weight of history pressing down on this moment. "It's been millions of years, Zara. We are the children of the worlds you seeded." Zara's eyes widened, taking in the mixed group of humans and Breen before her. "Fascinating. Our experiment, it succeeded beyond our wildest dreams." As Jeffrey and Dr. Rodriguez quickly briefed Zara on the current galactic situation, including the Breen's reproductive crisis and the tenuous alliance between their species, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Krell's voice crackled over the comm system. "Multiple ships approaching, various configurations. They're attempting to dock. Some are charging weapons." Zara's demeanor shifted, her posture straightening as she assessed the situation. "The knowledge contained in this station is too dangerous to fall into unprepared hands. We must act quickly." She glided over to a hidden console, her fingers dancing across the interface. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing schematics of a device Jeffrey had never seen before. "This is the culmination of our work," Zara explained, her voice tinged with both pride and caution. "A device capable of rewriting genetic code on a massive scale. It could solve your Breen friend's reproductive issues and unlock potential you've never dreamed of." Before anyone could react, the station's systems crackled to life. Warning, progenitor failsafe activated. Station self-destruct sequence initiated. Time remaining, 1 hour. A necessary precaution, Zara said, her expression grim. We cannot risk this technology falling into the wrong hands. Jeffrey's mind raced, weighing their options as the gravity of the situation sank in. They could attempt to disable the self-destruct sequence and salvage the device, but that risked conflict with the approaching ships and potential misuse of the technology. Alternatively, they could evacuate with Zara and the data they'd already collected, allowing the station to be destroyed. As the team debated, Oren stepped forward, her iridescent skin pulsing with dedication. Use the device on me, she proposed, her translator struggling to convey the intensity of her words. I volunteer as a test subject. We can potentially solve the Breen crisis and prove the technology's effectiveness. Jeffrey felt his chest tighten at Oren's suggestion. The growing bond between them made the potential risks of the procedure all the more terrifying. Oren, we don't know what it might do to you, he argued, his voice strained. Before they could discuss further, Krell's voice cut through the tension. First ship has docked. Armed crews are boarding the station. The situation was spiraling out of control. Jeffrey knew he had to make a series of rapid decisions that would affect not just their team, but potentially the fate of multiple species and the balance of power in the galaxy. Dr. Rodriguez, start downloading every bit of data you can from the progenitor systems, Jeffrey ordered. Krell, secure our exit route back to the Harmony. We may need to leave in a hurry. He turned to Zara, his expression resolute. Can you operate that genetic rewriting device safely in the time we have left? Zara nodded, her multiple eyes blinking in sequence. I can, but we must act quickly. The process is not without risk. Jeffrey took a deep breath, turning to face Oren. He could see the perseverance in her alien features, the willingness to sacrifice for her people. Are you absolutely sure about this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Oren's skin rippled with a pattern Jeffrey had come to recognize as affirmation. I am, she replied. For my people, for our future together, human and Breen. The sound of weapons fire echoed from a distant corridor, growing closer by the second. Jeffrey made his decision. Do it, he told Zara. We'll hold off the invaders as long as we can. As Zara and Oren moved to the genetic rewriting device, Jeffrey and Krell took up defensive positions near the chamber's entrance. Dr. Rodriguez worked feverishly at a nearby console, racing to extract as much progenitor data as possible before the station's destruction. The first of the invading forces rounded the corner, a mixed group of aliens Jeffrey had never seen before, all armed to the teeth and hungry for the power the station promised. He raised his weapon, knowing that the next few minutes would determine not just their fate, but potentially the course of galactic history. Behind him, the genetic rewriting device hummed to life, bathing Oren in a soft, pulsating light. Jeffrey steeled himself for the battle ahead, acutely aware of the countdown to the station's self-destruct ticking away in the background. Whatever the outcome, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Jeffrey's gaze darted between Oren and the genetic rewriting device, his mind racing through the potential consequences. The sound of weapons fire drew closer, and he knew they were out of time. Zara, we're going ahead with the procedure, he announced, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Dr. Rodriguez, assist Zara in setting up the equipment. Krell, hold that entrance. Oren stepped forward, her iridescent skin pulsing with a mix of fear and persistence. Jeffrey grasped her hand briefly, feeling the alien texture of her skin against his. We'll be monitoring you every second, he assured her. As Dr. Rodriguez and Zara prepared the device, Jeffrey joined Krell at the chamber's entrance. The Breen officer's weapon hummed with energy, ready to repel the incoming intruders. How long can you hold them? Jeffrey asked, checking his own sidearm. Krell's translator crackled. Long enough. Focus on the procedure. The genetic rewriting device came to life with a low hum, bathing Oren in a soft blue glow. Zara's multiple eyes blinked rapidly as she manipulated the controls, her movements precise and deliberate. The process has begun, Zara announced. We must not interrupt it no matter what happens. Jeffrey watched as Oren's form became obscured by the intensifying light. Dr. Rodriguez called out readings from a nearby console, her voice tight with concentration. Suddenly, the chamber shook with an explosion. Krell opened fire, his advanced Breen weapon unleashing a barrage of energy bolts down the corridor. The air filled with acrid smoke and the scent of ozone. "Multiple hostiles," Krell shouted. "Unknown species!" Jeffrey took up position beside Krell, firing his own weapon at the shadows moving through the smoke. The invaders returned fire, energy blasts sizzling past them and impacting the chamber walls. Behind them, alarms blared from the genetic rewriting device. Dr. Rodriguez's voice rose in panic. "Oren's vital signs are fluctuating wildly. Her DNA it's rewriting itself in ways we didn't anticipate." Jeffrey risked a glance back and saw Oren's silhouette within the blue glow. Her form seemed to ripple and shift, as if her very substance was becoming fluid. A massive energy blast rocked the chamber, momentarily blinding Jeffrey. As his vision cleared, he saw Zara crumple to the ground, struck by a stray bolt. Without thinking, he rushed to the progenitor's side, dragging her unconscious form behind the relative safety of a control panel. "The process is destabilizing," Dr. Rodriguez shouted over the chaos. "I'm trying to compensate, but—" Her words were cut off as the first wave of intruders breached the chamber. Krell engaged them in close combat, his Breen physiology allowing him to move with incredible speed. The station's AI cut through the din, its artificial voice unnervingly calm. "Warning: unauthorized use of progenitor technology detected. Self-destruct sequence accelerated. Time remaining: 15 minutes. Jeffrey's mind raced. They needed more time, but the station was tearing itself apart around them. Making a split-second decision, he lunged for a nearby console. "What are you doing?" Dr. Rodriguez called out, her hands flying over the controls of the genetic rewriter. "Downloading the station's database," Jeffrey replied, his fingers dancing across the alien interface. "We can't let all this knowledge be destroyed." As the download began, the blue glow surrounding Oren intensified to a blinding white. With a sound like shattering glass, the energy field collapsed, and Oren stumbled forward. Jeffrey's breath caught in his throat. Oren's appearance had transformed dramatically. Her skin still shimmered with the iridescence of a Breen, but her body structure had shifted, taking on more humanoid proportions. Her eyes, now a striking mix of Breen and human characteristics, darted around the room, taking in the chaotic scene. Without hesitation, Oren leapt into the fray. Her movements were a blur, combining Breen agility with newfound strength. She engaged the intruders alongside Krell, her hybrid physiology proving to be a formidable advantage. "We need to move," Jeffrey shouted, hefting the unconscious Zara over his shoulder. The portable device containing the station's database beeped, signaling the completion of the download. He snatched it up, securing it to his belt. Dr. Rodriguez quickly gathered what equipment she could carry. "The data from Oren's transformation," she explained, her voice tight with urgency. "We can't leave it behind." As a unit, they began fighting their way towards the docking bay where the Harmony waited. Oren and Krell took point, their combined abilities carving a path through the waves of intruders. Jeffrey, burdened with Zara's unconscious form, and Dr. Rodriguez brought up the rear, laying down covering fire when needed. The station groaned around them, systems failing as the self-destruct sequence counted down. They encountered pockets of resistance from various alien species, all desperate to claim the progenitor technology for themselves. 7 minutes to self-destruct, the AI announced dispassionately. They rounded a corner and the Harmony came into view, its sleek form a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. As they approached, Dr. Rodriguez let out a frustrated cry. "The database?" she said, gesturing to the device on Jeffrey's belt. "It's too large to transmit before the station explodes. We'll have to physically transport it." Jeffrey nodded grimly, understanding the implications. They would be a target for every faction in the sector. As they reached the Harmony's airlock, a final wave of intruders burst into the docking bay. Oren turned to face them, her hybrid features set in dogged commitment. "Go!" she shouted to the others. "I'll hold them off." Jeffrey hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "Krell, get us ready for immediate departure." The Breen officer rushed into the ship as Jeffrey and Dr. Rodriguez laid Zara gently on the deck. Jeffrey turned back to the airlock, watching as Oren single-handedly engaged the oncoming horde. Her new abilities were awe-inspiring. She moved with inhuman speed, her strikes precise and devastatingly powerful. But the intruders kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. "Oren," Jeffrey called out, "we need to go now." With a final sweeping attack that sent several aliens flying, Oren disengaged and sprinted for the Harmony. Jeffrey reached out, grasping her hand and pulling her inside as the airlock slammed shut. "All aboard," he called to Krell. "Get us out of here." The Harmony's engines roared to life, and they shot out of the docking bay just as the station's final failsafes gave way. Behind them, the ancient progenitor outpost erupted in a blinding explosion, taking with it the remaining intruders and the powerful genetic rewriting device. As the shockwave buffeted their ship, Jeffrey's relief was short-lived. The sensor array lit up, showing multiple ships in pursuit. "Looks like our troubles are just beginning," Krell announced from the helm, his voice grim. Jeffrey strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat, keenly aware of the precious cargo they carried. Zara, the injured progenitor, Oren, living proof of the genetic rewriting technology's potential, and the database containing secrets that could reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. As Krell piloted the Harmony through a series of evasive maneuvers, Jeffrey began plotting their next move. They needed to reach safe harbor, somewhere they could analyze their findings and ensure the information fell into the right hands. But with a growing fleet of hostile ships on their tail, each no doubt willing to destroy the Harmony to claim its precious cargo, their immediate future looked anything but certain. Peaceful. Jeffrey gripped the controls, his nucleus tightening as he scanned the sensor readouts. The Harmony's engines strained under the constant barrage of weapons fire from their pursuers. "We can't outrun them forever," Krell growled, his tentacles dancing over the ship's controls. "Our shields are down to 30%. Jeffrey's mind raced, searching for a solution. His eyes darted to the navigational display, where a dense cluster of asteroids loomed ahead. A risky plan formed in his mind. "Krell, set a course for that asteroid field," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. The Breen officer's eyes widened, but he didn't hesitate. "Understood. Plotting course now." As the Harmony banked sharply towards the asteroid field, Dr. Rodriguez stumbled into the cockpit, steadying herself against the bulkhead. "Are you insane?" she shouted over the blare of proximity alarms. "We'll be torn apart." Jeffrey's lips quirked into a grim smile. "Trust me, Doctor. Our ship has a few tricks up her sleeve." The Harmony plunged into the asteroid field, immediately surrounded by massive chunks of rock and ice. Krell's tentacles flew over the controls, guiding the ship through the treacherous terrain with preternatural skill. The pursuing vessels, caught off guard by the sudden maneuver, scattered in confusion. Jeffrey activated the ship's advanced hybrid propulsion system, a marvel of combined Breen and human technology. The Harmony responded instantly, weaving through gaps barely wider than its hull with impossible agility. Behind them, explosions lit up the void as less maneuverable ships collided with asteroids or each other. Dr. Rodriguez gripped the back of Jeffrey's chair, her fist clenched but her eyes wide with amazement. "It's working," she breathed, watching as their pursuers dwindled on the sensors. "They can't keep up." Oren entered the cockpit, her new hybrid form moving with fluid grace. She placed a hand on Jeffrey's shoulder, her touch a mix of familiar and alien sensations. "Brilliant strategy," she said, her voice carrying notes of both Breen and human inflection. As they emerged from the far side of the asteroid field, a collective sigh of relief filled the cockpit, but their respite was short-lived. Looming before them, filling the view screen with its massive bulk, was a Breen warship. Jeffrey's hand instinctively moved towards the weapons controls, but before he could act, the ship's comm system crackled to life. A familiar voice filled the cabin. "Harmony, this is Chancellor Zix. Stand down and prepare to dock. We're here to offer protection." The tension in the cockpit eased slightly, but Jeffrey remained wary. "Authenticate, Chancellor," he demanded, unwilling to take any chances with their precious cargo. A string of code flashed across their secure channel, confirming the Chancellor's identity. Jeffrey nodded to Krell, who began the docking procedures. As the Harmony was drawn into the massive warship's docking bay, Jeffrey turned to his crew. "Stay alert," he warned. "We're not out of this yet." The moment they disembarked, they were surrounded by a contingent of Breen security officers who quickly ushered them through the ship's winding corridors. Jeffrey noted with surprise the presence of human diplomatic staff mixed among the Breen crew. They were led to a secure briefing room where Chancellor Zix awaited them, along with a group of human officials. The Chancellor's multifaceted eyes swept over the group, lingering on Oren's transformed appearance. "I see you've had quite the adventure," Zix said, his translator conveying a mix of curiosity and concern. "We have much to discuss." As the Breen warship engaged the remaining pursuers, Jeffrey and Dr. Rodriguez began their debriefing. They recounted the events at the progenitor station, the genetic rewriting device, and the contents of the database they had managed to salvage. The room fell into stunned silence as the implications of their discoveries sank in. The existence of the progenitors, the potential for interspecies compatibility, the power of the genetic database. It was almost too much to process. Oren stepped forward, her hybrid form drawing all eyes in the room. "I volunteer to undergo any examinations necessary to demonstrate the success of the genetic modification," she announced, her voice steady and determined. Chancellor Zix nodded, gesturing to a team of medical officers who had been standing by. As Oren was led away for tests, a commotion near the back of the room drew everyone's attention. Zara, the progenitor they had rescued, had regained consciousness. She sat up slowly, her alien features registering confusion and then recognition as she took in her surroundings. "You've awakened," Jeffrey said, moving to her side. "How do you feel?" Zara's multiple eyes blinked in sequence, focusing on Jeffrey. "Disoriented but functional," she replied. Her gaze swept the room, taking in the mix of Breen and human faces. "I see much has transpired while I was unconscious. Perhaps it's time I shared what I know of my people's true purpose." As Zara began to speak, revealing the progenitor's vision of a united galactic community, Jeffrey felt a sense of awe wash over him. The genetic seeding program, the compatibility between species, it all began to make sense. Chancellor Zix and the human representatives listened intently, their expressions a mix of wonder and calculation. As Zara concluded her explanation, the room buzzed with excited whispers. One of the human diplomats, a stern-faced woman with graying hair, stepped forward. "This information could reshape the entire balance of power in the galaxy," she said, her voice tight with barely held-back excitement. "We need to establish some sort of regulatory body immediately." Chancellor Zix nodded in agreement. "A joint council, perhaps, with representatives from all involved species." As the officials began to debate the logistics of such an arrangement, Jeffrey's mind raced ahead. He saw not just the potential for scientific advancement, but also the danger. How many more groups would come after them, seeking to control this knowledge? "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the chatter. All eyes turned to him. "I have a proposal." Jeffrey took a deep breath, knowing that his next words could change the course of galactic history. What if, instead of hoarding this knowledge, we share it? Not just the data, but the practical applications. He outlined his vision, a network of genetic modification clinics spread throughout the galaxy, offering controlled and regulated services to individuals of all species. As he spoke, he saw the idea take hold, sparking enthusiasm in some faces and concern in others. Before the debate could begin anew, the door to the briefing room slid open. Oren entered, accompanied by the medical team. Her eyes, now a striking blend of Breen and human characteristics, sought out Jeffrey's. "The tests are conclusive," she announced, her voice carrying a note of wonder. "My genetic structure has been fundamentally altered. I am now compatible with both Breen and human physiology." The room erupted in excited exclamations. Chancellor Zix moved to Oren's side, his normally impassive features animated with hope. "You mean—" Oren nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "Yes, Chancellor. The crisis facing our people, it can be solved." As the implications of this revelation rippled through the room, Jeffrey felt a surge of optimism. He looked at Oren, seeing in her transformed features the potential for a new era of interspecies cooperation. The human diplomat who had spoken earlier approached Jeffrey, her expression thoughtful. "Your clinic proposal," she said, her voice low. "It's risky, but it could work. It could change everything." Jeffrey nodded, his mind already racing ahead to the challenges and opportunities that lay before them. "It won't be easy," he said, "but I believe it's our best chance for a united future." As discussions resumed around them, now centered on the logistics of establishing the first interspecies clinic, Jeffrey felt a hand slip into his. He turned to see Oren at his side, her eyes shining with a mixture of emotions he was only beginning to understand. "Whatever comes next," she said softly, "we face it together." Jeffrey squeezed her hand, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this point. As he looked around the room, at Zara sharing her ancient knowledge, at Breen and humans working side by side, at Dr. Rodriguez already sketching out plans for the clinic, he knew that their adventure was just the beginning. In fact, he realized it was only just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.